Take a slow breath for a moment. Not because this is just another video, but because something inside you already knows. You were meant to hear this. There are moments in life when we don't search for a message. The message finds us. You didn't click this by accident. You didn't stay out of curiosity alone. Something deeper pulled you here. Because long before words, long before logic, your soul recognized the signal. For most of your life, you may have felt different, not better, not worse, just different. As if you were standing slightly out of sync with the world around you. As if your spirit refused to fully settle into small explanations or ordinary paths. You may have asked yourself quietly, why does life feel heavier for me? Why do I feel called towards something I can't fully name? Why do I sense meaning where others see coincidence? This video is not here to flatter you. It is here to remind you. Because there is a truth many people sense but never articulate. Some lives unfold with unusual pressure, unusual depth, and unusual timing. Not because they are cursed, but because they are assigned. Throughout history, spiritual traditions, theology, and sacred texts have wrestled with one central mystery. Does life carry intention before we are even aware of it? Scripture speaks of being known before birth. Theologians speak of divine providence. Mystics speak of callings written into the soul, different languages, different frameworks, but one shared insight. That human life is not merely random movement through time. It is participation in a story larger than the self. This message is for those who have endured seasons of confusion, loss, and inner pressure, and still felt an unexplainable pull forward. For those who survived moments that should have broken them, yet emerged with more awareness, not less. For those who sensed that their pain was never meaningless, even when it was unbearable. You are not here to be entertained. You are here to remember. In the minutes ahead, we will explore a powerful idea, not as fantasy, not as dogma, but as a spiritual framework drawn from theology, history, and human experience. The idea that your life carries a divine assignment, that your struggles shaped you, not to punish you, but to prepare you, that your presence here is not accidental, and your future is not empty. This is not about ego, this is not about superiority, this is about responsibility. Because when meaning is remembered, life changes. If you've ever felt the quiet sense that you are meant to serve, to heal, to create, or to carry light in places others avoid, then stay with me. What we are about to explore may not give you all the answers, but it may finally give language to what your soul has known all along. This is the beginning of remembering who you are. Part 1. The feeling of being different was never random. Before you ever had the words to explain it, you felt it. A quiet separation, an invisible distance between you and the world around you. Not isolation in the physical sense, but a sense that your inner world operated on a different frequency. As a child, you may have been more sensitive than others. You noticed emotional shifts in rooms. You felt the weight behind people's words. You asked deeper questions earlier than most, and if you're honest, you often wondered why life seemed to press harder on you than on those around you. In theology, this phenomenon is not unfamiliar. Throughout sacred history, individuals who carried responsibility beyond themselves often experienced early tension in life. Not because something was wrong with them, but because something was being formed. The prophet Jeremiah speaks of being known before birth. Moses wrestled with identity before leadership. David endured obscurity before kingship. Even Jesus lived years of silence before public ministry. Formation almost always begins in hidden places. The modern world often interprets this feeling of difference as anxiety, alienation, or failure to conform. But spiritually, Difference often signals preparation. You are not meant to dissolve into the crowd. You are meant to develop depth. That is why small spaces feel uncomfortable to you. That is why shallow conversations exhaust you. That is why routines without meaning slowly drain your spirit. Your soul resists confinement, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. In theological language, this is called calling, not a career, not a title, but an inner orientation toward meaning. And here is what most people never realize. Calling rarely feels empowering at first. It feels heavy. It feels lonely. It feels confusing because responsibility is sensed long before it is understood. You may have spent years trying to fit in, dimming parts of yourself to survive, questioning why authenticity felt risky. But the discomfort was not a flaw. It was a signal that your life was not designed to be lived unconsciously. This is why ordinary success never fully satisfied you, why achievements felt hollow without purpose, why comfort alone was never enough. The soul knows when it is made for more, even if the mind hasn't caught up yet. And here is the critical insight. Spiritual traditions do not teach that every person is assigned the same weight of responsibility. They teach that each person is entrusted according to capacity. To whom much is given, much is required. This is not favoritism, it is stewardship. You are given awareness because you could carry it. You were given sensitivity because you could survive it. You were given depth because your life would require it. Even the pressure you felt growing up, the sense that life expected something from you, was part of your formation. You weren't broken, you were being tuned. In silence, in confusion, in moments when no one saw what you were becoming. And that is why the next truth matters deeply. When a life carries meaning, nothing in it is accidental, especially the pain. Part 2. Why pain followed you, and why it was never meant to destroy you. If you look back honestly, you will notice something that has always been difficult to explain. Struggle did not arrive late in your life. It arrived early. While others were still discovering innocence, you were learning endurance. While others felt protected by certainty, you were learning how to survive uncertainty. Loss, emotional wounds, disappointment, moments that forced you to grow up faster than you wanted to. And at some point, a question likely formed in your heart. Why does life feel harder for me? This is where many people lose faith, because pain feels like evidence of abandonment. But theology offers a different lens. In scripture and spiritual history, suffering is not introduced as cruelty, it is introduced as formation. Not all pain is chosen, not all pain is explained, but pain, when met with awareness, becomes a shaping force. Theologians often describe this as refinement, like fire to metal, pressure to stone, weight to muscle. Not because the material is weak, but because it is capable of becoming stronger. Look closely at the pattern across sacred texts. Those entrusted with insight were often acquainted with sorrow. Joseph endured betrayal before leadership. Job encountered loss before wisdom. The apostles faced persecution before influence, and even Christ himself entered suffering, not as punishment, but as participation in the human condition. Pain does not automatically make a person wise, but pain can make a person deep, and depth is what responsibility requires. You are not shaped by comfort, you are shaped by contrast, by learning what breaks people, so you would know how to heal them, by feeling loneliness, so you would recognize it in others, by enduring confusion, so you could guide others through it. This is where the idea of soul assignment becomes meaningful. Not as a mystical fantasy, but as a framework for understanding responsibility. Some lives are trained through ease, others through endurance. Not because one is loved more, but because one is prepared differently. You did not suffer because you were weak. You suffered because your life required resilience. And here is something few people realize. Pain does not only shape character, it expands perception. You see beneath surfaces. You sense emotional undercurrents. You recognize unspoken struggles. This awareness was not accidental. It was forged. Every time you survived what should have ended you, your capacity increased. Your compassion deepened. Your discernment sharpened. Your spirit strengthened. And heaven noticed. Not because suffering impresses God, but because endurance reveals readiness. There is a reason you didn't collapse when others might have. A reason you found meaning where others gave up. A reason you kept going even when motivation disappeared. You were not being punished. You were being prepared. This does not mean suffering was good. It means suffering was used. And there is an important distinction. Theology does not teach that God delights in pain. It teaches that God redeems pain, nothing wasted, nothing meaningless, nothing without potential for transformation. And now, here is the turning point many people miss. Pain was not the destination. It was the doorway. The suffering shaped you so that you could carry what comes next. Because responsibility without resilience collapses. Calling without character corrupts. Influence without humility destroys. You were being trained quietly, when no one applauded, when no one understood, when you doubted yourself. And now you stand at a threshold, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you are no longer fragile. Part 3. Divine intention without destiny. How purpose and free will coexist. One of the greatest misunderstandings in spiritual conversations is this, that if life has divine intention, then human freedom must be an illusion. But theology has never supported that conclusion. In fact, the most enduring spiritual traditions insist on a paradox. God guides, but does not coerce. Purpose exists, but choice remains. This distinction matters deeply, because many people hear words like chosen, assigned, or called, and imagine a rigid script, a destiny locked in place long before their consent. That is not how sacred history unfolds. Even the figures most clearly associated with divine purpose were never stripped of choice. Moses resisted his calling. Jonah fled from it. Peter denied it. Paul wrestled with it. Divine intention did not remove their freedom. It confronted it. This is why the idea of a soul contract is best understood not as a literal document, but as a relational commitment. A life lived in dialogue with the divine. A direction offered, not imposed. A calling that waits for consent. Purpose does not force itself into existence. It invites. And this is where your experience becomes meaningful. You were never dragged forward. You were pulled. Through curiosity, through discomfort, through longing. Every time you felt restless in a life that looked fine from the outside, that was not dissatisfaction. It was alignment calling you deeper. Divine intention works less like commands and more like gravity. It does not shout, it draws, and you always retain the right to say no. This is why your journey may have felt delayed at times, why doors opened slowly, why progress felt non-linear. Not because something was wrong, but because growth was happening internally before it became visible. Free will is not the enemy of purpose. It is the mechanism through which purpose becomes real. Without choice, love is meaningless. Without consent, calling becomes control. This is why spiritual maturity is not measured by obedience alone, but by alignment. When your inner values, awareness, and actions begin to point in the same direction. And notice something important. Your calling did not demand perfection. It demanded honesty. It did not require flawlessness. It required willingness. Every mistake you made did not disqualify you. It taught you. Every detour did not erase purpose. It refined it. Theologians often describe this as co-creation. God does not act instead of humans. God acts with humans. Your life unfolded as a collaboration. Divine invitation meeting human response. This explains something deeply personal. Why moments of alignment feel peaceful even when they are difficult. Why certain decisions felt right in your spirit even when they were costly. Why some opportunities drained you while others expanded you. Purpose feels less like pressure and more like recognition, like remembering something you already knew. And here is the quiet truth. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not disqualified. You are arriving. Arriving at the version of yourself that can carry what is next without losing humility, compassion, or clarity. Because responsibility matures only in freedom. Part 4. The real mission. Why love is the highest form of power. When people hear the word purpose, they often imagine visibility, influence, recognition, impact measured in numbers. But theology tells a very different story. In sacred tradition, the most transformative force in existence is not power as dominance. It is love as presence. Not emotion alone, not sentimentality, but a way of being that alters everything it touches. This is why, when Scripture speaks of God's nature, it does not say God is control. It does not say God is fear. It says God is love. And if a life is shaped by divine intention, then love becomes its language. This is where many misunderstand the idea of being chosen. Chosen does not mean elevated above others. It means entrusted for others. Responsibility always flows outward. Your calling was never about standing above the world. It was about standing within it without losing your soul. Love, in theological terms, is not passive. It is costly. It requires patience when withdrawal feels easier. Truth when silence feels safer. Compassion when judgment would feel justified. This is why your formation required pain. Because love without depth becomes naive, and love without resilience collapses under pressure. You were shaped to hold love in complex environments, not just peaceful ones. To carry presence into spaces where people feel unseen. To remain grounded where others react. To bring clarity where confusion reigns. This is not small work. This is spiritual labor. And notice something crucial. Your influence does not come from convincing others. It comes from being. People are not transformed by arguments alone. They are transformed by encounters, by meeting someone who listens deeply, who responds rather than reacts, who carries calm without superiority. Love disarms defensiveness. It creates safety for truth. This is why your presence has mattered more than you realize. Moments where you stayed when others left, spoke gently when harshness was expected, offered understanding instead of condemnation. These were not accidents. They were expressions of alignment. The world does not need more noise. It needs more grounded people. People who have faced darkness without becoming it. People who have suffered without hardening. People who carry light without needing applause. This is why your journey was internal before it was visible. Because love that has not been tested cannot be trusted. And now you are being invited to live this mission consciously. Not to save everyone, not to fix everything, but to embody something rare. Steadiness, compassion, discernment, truth without cruelty, love without self-erasure. And here is the paradox. The more aligned you become with love, the less you need to prove anything. Authority emerges naturally. Influence becomes quiet but undeniable. People feel it, even if they cannot explain it. Part 5. Stepping into alignment. What changes when you stop doubting your place? There comes a moment in every meaningful life when reflection must turn into embodiment. Not urgency, not pressure, but integration. Up to this point, much of your journey has been internal. Awareness forming quietly, values sharpening through experience, strength developing beneath the surface, but alignment does not stay hidden forever. Eventually, what has been formed within asks to be lived outwardly. This is where many hesitate, not because they lack ability, but because they underestimate legitimacy. You may still question yourself, wonder if you are ready. Feel the old instinct to wait until certainty arrives. But spiritual maturity does not begin with certainty. It begins with commitment. Commitment to live honestly, to choose integrity over convenience, to respond rather than react, to act from love even when fear presents louder arguments. Alignment is not a dramatic transformation. It is a sequence of small, faithful decisions. How you speak when misunderstanding is possible. How you listen when distraction is easier. How you choose when no one is watching. These moments shape reality more than grand declarations ever could. This is where divine intention and human will meet most clearly. Not in visions, not in extraordinary events, but in daily posture. The posture of responsibility. And here is something important to understand. When alignment increases, resistance often appears. Not as external opposition alone, but as internal hesitation. Old doubts surface, familiar fears resurface. The mind revisits questions it has already outgrown. This does not mean you are regressing. It means you are approaching the edge of growth. Every expansion challenges identity. Because stepping into alignment requires releasing former versions of yourself, versions built for survival, not stewardship. And survival patterns resist change. But you are no longer being asked to survive. You are being asked to participate consciously. This participation does not demand perfection. It demands presence. To remain aware, to stay connected to meaning, to correct course when needed, without self-condemnation. This is where faith becomes practical. Not belief as assumption, but trust as action. Trust that your values matter. Trust that your choices ripple outward. Trust that love, lived consistently, transforms environments quietly but powerfully. You are not meant to withdraw from the world. You are meant to engage it wisely, to move through complexity without losing clarity, to stand in tension without becoming rigid, to serve without self-erasure. This is alignment, and alignment changes how life feels. Decisions become clearer, not easier, but clearer. Boundaries strengthen, not from fear, but from discernment. Peace deepens, not because conflict disappears, but because inner division dissolves. You stop asking, "Do I belong here?" and begin asking, "How can I serve well from where I stand?" This is not the end of the journey. It is the moment the journey becomes intentional. Part 6. When everything finally makes sense, the quiet confirmation. There is a moment that arrives not with thunder, but with stillness, not with certainty shouted from the outside, but with recognition rising from within. It is the moment when the pieces of your life, the confusion, the delays, the suffering, the growth, stop feeling disconnected. Not because you suddenly understand everything, but because you understand enough. Enough to stop resisting your own becoming. This is what many people mistake for destiny. But it is something far more human and far more sacred. It is coherence, the realization that your life has been forming a shape, even when you could not see it, that nothing was wasted, not the years of questioning, not the seasons of pain, not the silence. Theologians sometimes speak of this as vocation revealed through reflection, not discovered in a single moment, but recognized in hindsight. You look back and see patterns you could not see while living them, moments that sharpened discernment, losses that redirected values, delays that protected you from paths you are not meant to take. This is why your understanding deepened slowly, because wisdom gained too early becomes arrogance, and responsibility accepted too quickly becomes brittle. You needed time to develop compassion without superiority, strength without hardness, faith without illusion. And now, something has shifted. Not externally, internally. You're no longer searching for permission. You're no longer asking the world to validate your worth. You are grounded. This is the quiet confirmation the video points toward. Not a mystical announcement, but an internal alignment that no longer needs explanation. You trust your discernment, you respect your limits, you recognize your influence. Not because you feel powerful, but because you feel rooted. This is where fear loses its grip. Not because fear disappears, but because it no longer decides. You move forward not with urgency, but with intention. And intention changes everything. It changes how you relate to others, how you engage conflict, how you measure success. You no longer chase meaning, you express it. This is the stage where your presence becomes stabilizing for others, not because you have all the answers, but because you are not threatened by questions. Not because you dominate space, but because you hold it. And this is the deeper truth beneath all language about being chosen. A chosen life is not elevated above others. It is anchored in responsibility, anchored in humility, anchored in love. Conclusion: your life as a masterpiece in progress. Take a moment to breathe, not as preparation for what comes next, but as recognition of what already exists within you. Your life is not a series of random events. It is not a collection of mistakes, coincidences, or delays. It is a living tapestry, woven quietly by your experiences, your choices, and yes, by divine guidance. You were never accidental. You were never overlooked. You were never too fragile to carry what was entrusted to you. All the times you questioned yourself, all the moments you felt alone, all the seasons of pain and doubt, they were forming a foundation, not for recognition, not for reward, but for resilience, wisdom, and presence. This is the gift of alignment, to see your life not as a problem to solve, but as a story to inhabit, to recognize that your challenges prepared you to love more deeply, to act more intentionally, and to radiate influence without seeking applause. The soul contract you may have felt in whispers, in nudges, in restless nights, was never about perfection. It was about participation, a call to engage fully with life, with love, and with purpose. You are a living testimony that suffering can be transformed into wisdom, that pain can become preparation, that depth and difference are not burdens, but blessings. And now you stand at the edge of a new awareness, a quiet confirmation that your journey has meaning, that your struggles were not in vain, that your presence here matters. Step forward with intention. Carry love as your strength. Hold discernment as your guide. Live courageously in the spaces where others may falter. Because the world needs people who embody clarity, compassion, and resilience. Not as heroes, but as grounded, aligned souls who remind others what is possible. Remember, you are capable, you are ready, you are significant, and this life, with all its shadows and light, is your masterpiece in progress. Every choice you make, every act of love, every moment of integrity is a brushstroke in that grand design. So pause, reflect, breathe, and then, when you are ready, step into the life that has always been waiting for you. You are the chosen one, not because you are perfect, but because you were made for this. And now, the world will see it, one conscious choice at a time.